Hey folks, it's me, Casual Tycoon. We're back with the final part of my Dragon Coaster creation for Iron Matty's Dragon Coaster competition. Last week I realized, well, not last week, a few weeks ago, I realized that I didn't leave you with any cinematic shots of the maintenance shed that we helped create for the kind of funky little corner where we decided to put the maintenance shed. So here they are. I hope you like them. And I think it turned out really nicely. This is the last installation of this series, so thank you all who have joined so far. I hope you enjoy this final part. For this final part, we are going to go ahead and kind of clean up all the remaining bits that need to be cleaned up for the ride to be submitted to the competition. It's already been submitted and it's available already on the workshop. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in it. And I'll be sure to link Iron Matty's coaster competition video when it goes live, I think, later in this month. But for right now, what we wanted to do is start on cleaning up the queue, which includes adding a kind of small queue cover that reused the funny-looking roof that it created. I think it was way back in the second part of this series. The next part was to kind of create a foundation for the path that led up to the building, the station itself. If you remember from the last time we had one of these videos, I had to rearrange the queue path because the maintenance shed was not working the way I originally planned on it to work. But since that was all figured out, I think we ended up with a slightly nicer, more organized, and more manageable queue. It also kind of lines up kind of nicely with some future plans I have for this area. Even though this is a competition by itself, the Dragon Coaster and the other competition for the water feature, which is just next door, was already submitted, I think I can continue to build on this. Maybe not in the same Western style, but as people say on the internet, watch out to see what happens of it. But in the meantime, a lot of this kind of cleaning up involved doing a lot of little pieces which were sometimes fun and sometimes not so fun. For instance, fun was creating these kind of railing foundations that would help delineate the queue, which was really useful later on when I went ahead and put down the railings. Now those railings are kind of the same ones that I've used throughout the ride, and they're the kind of basic Planko ones. If you remember way back when, in the first episode, I explained that the competition was a no TMTK competition, so it required me to use all in-game pieces, as opposed to creating my own custom rails, which may have looked a little bit better. I just went for the in-game wooden railings, which I think work out just fine. I like to use them in my builds here and there. They look good, and they add to the kind of rustic wooden Western aesthetic that I've got going on so far. Now I have to excuse myself for my voice. I did happen to get a little sick upon coming back from my vacation, which explains why this video is a little later than the last one that came out. But I hope that's alright with you all and it's not too big of an issue, and the sound is, of okay quality. Now, recognizing that we don't want peeps to jump in underneath the roller coaster, I had to add a few safety fences that were a little taller than the railings themselves. Those use that same glue that I've been using throughout the build, and I used in the Rising Raptor water feature ride. So it felt nice and cohesive to use that. I also later use it to put up some little signage, which just adds to the immersion of the ride, and helps create a little bit more variety of textures and depth in the overall structure of the ride. Now, one thing with these wooden railings is that they are not very user friendly for creating diagonals, which is fine, so you'll have to excuse me for that. They don't look the best, but they make do. They look good for now. And they're just a small part of a larger build that I think works out well. Now that I've kind of finished up the queue itself, I worked on cleaning up the exit of the ride, which I fixed last time as well, because if you remember, it was just a staircase that led out into kind of this larger plaza area, and it didn't have a landing, so it wasn't quite as accessible as the second version that I built, but also it kind of detracted from the overall look of the ride area. It was too centralized, and by putting it off center here, you focus more on the ride and bits and pieces of the station build that you can see from the plaza. Again, I use blue trim throughout the building process, and then these wooden balcony pieces, or wooden platform balconies, they're really convenient, and I think I end up using them throughout the queue as well. They're nice in case you don't want to have to path these rides later on. They still look aesthetically pretty nice. Now, with the queue and the exit path all set up, I figured that I would work on cleaning up some of the bottom path, or rather the path around the ride. It was feeling a little too stiff and a little boring, I'll say. So I wanted to make it seem kind of more like someone was meandering through a forest before you get to the ride itself. It's a small ride area, so to kind of get that effect is not super easy. So once I cleaned up those paths and I cleaned up the supports around them, I copied over some of the existing fencing from the Rising Raptor, and then used it to make a nice kind of semi-don't die fencing for the Dragon Coaster. Now, I don't think it needs to be any higher than this, only because it's a kiddie coaster, and it's pretty far set back. Maybe a more realistic version would have some additional fencing inside the ride area, particularly at the end, you'll see. But for now, I think it looks pretty nice. I hope you think so too. On the other side of the fence, or the other side of the path, where there are no kind of ride collision possibilities, I just sink in these really nice railings, and it creates a nice clean wooden edge all the way around the path, which I think is nicer than the typical Planko curbs. I also added some additional foliage to fill in the kind of sparse areas around the ride that didn't quite have a whole lot of variety in terms of height, color, and texture. One of the final big things, though, and you can see I'm building it here, that I really wanted to include in this build was a section where the ride would kind of traverse some sort of platform or bridge of some sort. Kind of adding again to the idea that this person, Sammy, builds weird things, and they're just kind of funky. So I use these wooden logs and balcony pieces and those wooden railings I like to use, and match them up, I think, fairly nicely with the part of the track that goes right over the entrance of the queue. So it's a really cool way of folks coming in, seeing the ride. Adds a lot of interactivity and kind of dynamic energy to the plaza as well. And it's also obviously a safety concern. It blocks folks from touching the tracks or getting too close. As per usual, I added some blue wooden trim. And you might have noticed that I also included those logs are really good for hiding the entrance queues, those pillars that Planko includes. To make it seem a little bit more fiery, I included this steam pipe, and later on in the build I add some steam, some fire, some sparklers throughout, and you'll see it adds to the area just a little bit. They're not triggered or anything, but it does look nice. I also added them in this kind of small section of the queue where there wasn't really anything else going on. Now, even though this is a daytime build, I realize that there should be some lighting. I don't say I'm building in any sort of very realistic sense, but this is a kind of light realism, and so including some lamps here and there not only helped aesthetically to kind of bring the whole thing together, but also make it look a little bit more realistic. So those lamps went into the queue, they go into the plaza. You saw I added some to the station as well, and it really also helps it just look really, really sweet at night. I didn't know this, but you can sink these lamps down into the railings, and they also look very nice. I think we're getting right about to the end of the build. There's a few things I did off camera, which you won't see until we get to the cinematics, but those include the ride sign, a little bit of cleaning up of the edges and whatnot, but I just couldn't capture those in time to submit it for the competition. So they are in the final build. You just won't see me build them here, which I think is okay. There's been 4 parts of one coaster, which I would say is quite a bit. So for folks who have joined me, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. If you like this video and others, don't forget to put a like on the video. Consider subscribing. I know there are other Planet Coaster competitions coming up, and I will likely use this park as part of them, which is very exciting. Of course, no coaster would be complete without some station lighting. It's a little bit of ambience, not too much, but just something that would be something that would just make the station kind of usable at night, you know? Give it a nice healthy glow. One of the little pieces that I realized I hadn't finished was there are these big gaps in the station where you can kind of see underneath the tracks. It's not something I usually fix, but I just wanted to kind of clean it up, and I include that here and make sure to include some of the blue trim. Now, this is the first time I've really built a big dragon coaster, so this was a really fun experience. I think that it turned out really well. If you remember from some of the first parts, I was really inspired by some things like Fire Chaser Express at Dollywood, but I also thought of things like the Hagrid's ride at Islands of Adventure, and I really wanted it to kind of play off of the water feature competition flat ride that's just behind it. I think in the end they turned out to be really nice complements to each other, and I think in the future, with a kind of larger plaza with some maybe eats and restaurants and restrooms and maybe a staff building, this could come out to be a really nice little western town area of a mini park. Whether or not I'll get there, we'll see. But for now, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy some of these cinematics. Bye now, folks.